Welcome to Vermont School Bus 101. This is going to be an instructional video on this manual, Vermont School Bus. It's one of the two manuals that Vermont puts out. The larger one is the Vermont Commercial Driver's Manual, and then there's this one. So keep this book with you as we go through this tutorial and follow along. Be sure to read along with me as we go. Maybe you'll have to shut the video off from time to time to read through a section again. But keep your book with you the whole time. If this video has been out for more than a year, check with your instructor to make sure there's no changes in the current manual. There have been very few that I've seen over the years. They're very minor. I haven't seen anything major in quite a while, but be sure to check with your instructor. So open your book and let's get started. So let's take a look at part 1 in that book, under school transportation. Now, I want you to turn the video off and read those paragraphs for yourself, because there's some pretty important information in there. Mostly that a school bus is 8 times safer than what a passenger vehicle would be. So your kids are pretty safe in a school bus. But read through that and let's move on after that. Now, under the vehicle section of this book, you'll read that the school buses are one of the most safest vehicles out there, and the state and federal regulations set the standards for that safety. Now, the state of Vermont regulations are outlined in school bus laws later in this book that we'll go over, but the federal motor vehicle safety standards have some key requirements that we're going to go over right now. Now, the first one in the bullet points is requiring high back, well-padded seats for your safety, including wheelchair secure. The next bullet point indicates a braking system that is safer than most vehicles out there, so make note of that. And the next bullet point describes reflectors and lights that are on the school bus for safety for loading and unloading students. And we'll talk about those 8-way lights and the reflectors later on. The next bullet point describes the mirrors that allows the driver to be able to see the entire front of the vehicle at the left or right side and 200 feet behind the vehicle. And we'll also talk about those later on. And there's also a stop arm that exists on the left side of the bus that comes out when you activate your 8-way lights. Now, this is specially lit and has reflective material so people can see it well. And there are also several emergency exits, including in the roof, out the windows, and the rear door. We'll go over those also. And the next bullet point describes these exits as being very secure, even in a rollover. So there's a less chance of a roof collapse, but if it's under extreme stress, the windows and doors will still open. And the passenger compartment is designed in such a way that sharp metals and flying debris is as restricted as possible to keep the passengers safe. The next bullet point describes the fuel system, including fuel pump, fuel tank, fuel lines, and just how safe they are. And one of the reasons for them being so safe is the inspection period is every 3 months. Under the next bullet point, it has been law for quite a while that all school buses must be painted National School Bus Glossy Yellow. Now, under non-conforming vehicles, you'll see the first paragraph makes a note that any vehicle with a seating capacity of more than 11 must meet federal motor vehicle safety standards if it is leased or hired or used by the school. Now, the vehicles not meeting these standards are called non-conforming school buses or non-conforming vehicles. And these vehicles cannot be used to transport children to or from school, but can be used to transport equipment or teachers or faculty, that sort of thing. Now, just as a side note, as you see on the bottom there, removing seats from a vehicle just to make it 10 or less is not permitted. So the next section we have, what does a school bus mean? And we'll read that sentence. School bus means Any motor vehicle used to transport children to or from school or in connection with school activities, except, and we're going to go through each one of those. The first one is common carriers, carriers that incidentally carry school children or passengers. That could be city buses, coaches, public transportation. The next one is private vehicles, or your personal vehicle is an exception, as long as it's not owned or leased or used by the school itself. Number 3 is also passenger vehicles, as long as you're not paying them any kind of reimbursement for whether it's mileage or their time, and it's not owned or leased by the school as well. The next exception is a vehicle with fewer than 11 seats, 10 seats, and it's not owned or hired or leased by the school itself. However, if this vehicle is used to transport students, it has to have a simple lighting system of 2 red flashing lights. Unless the driver of the vehicle is employed by the school and the vehicle, or you don't carry more than 5 people, and everybody has to have a seatbelt. The next exception, number 5, is motor coaches themselves. And I want you to read through that paragraph, turn off this video, and just discover what that is for yourself. And the next exception is a multifunction bus, or a multi-school special event bus. Can carry students to and from special events like athletics or other special events. But if the driver is going to be unsupervised or the only adult in the vehicle, then he has to be subject to a criminal background check. And you can read Section 1287 for yourself to discover other exempt vehicles. Now let's look at a Type 1 school bus. That is a school bus that seats more than 15 people, including the operator. And a Type 2 school bus seats between 10 and 15 people, including the operator. We'll talk more about the Type 1 and Type 2 school buses later. Now let's talk about multifunction school activity buses for a minute. A multifunction school bus, a bus that carries students anywhere other than a fixed route to and from school. So it can be special routes and activities. And it has to meet all the same safety requirements as a school bus. The other multifunction school bus is one that's owned by the school, and the driver has to have a CDL and a school bus endorsement if he's going to be transporting students, and he has to take a road test in the multifunction school bus that he will be driving, and is restricted to only that bus. Otherwise, it's considered a Type 1 or Type 2 school bus that we'll get into in a minute. Not only that, but a multifunction school bus can be any other color other than National School Bus Glossy Yellow. Now I want you to take a minute and turn the video off and read the section, The Driver, for yourself, and then we'll get into part 2. All right, let's get started on part 2. And remember, you should have this book with you while we're going through this series. Read along with me because there's information in here you may want to underline. It could be a 2024, 25, 26, wherever you are, or whatever time period this is. Your instructor will tell you if there's any changes in that. So let's start with becoming a school bus driver. I hope you read through those first 2 paragraphs. It's really just telling you that we're going to briefly go through what that entails, and then we'll go through it in a little more detail. So first, let's see what it takes to have a Type 1 CDL license. This is a seating capacity of more than 15 people, remember, and you have to have a medical exam. Now, I'm not going to get into the difference between the medical exam or report between Type 1 and Type 2. You really kind of have to be a doctor to know that. But just know that when you make your appointment with occupational health, just tell them what type of license you're going for, and they'll take care of that. You also need a school bus clinic. You have to have that 6 months before you go for your license, and then you'll have to have one every 4 years after that. You'll also need your CDL general, a school bus endorsement, a passenger endorsement, eye test, written test, and a road test. Type 1 license just entails a lot more, encompasses a lot more, but that gives you the right to drive any other school bus, type 1 or multifunction or anything else. You don't have to be retested. Now for the type 2 operator, it's fewer than 16 passengers, including the operator, which means a seating capacity of 15 basically. You still need a physical exam. You still need a school bus clinic, but you only need a regular driver's license, not a CDL. But you do need a school bus endorsement. You also need a eye test, written test, and a road test. So the simple difference between a type 1 CDL and a type 2 non-CDL is that there's more knowledge required for a type 1, and you have to do a full pre-trip inspection of your bus. Now, under driver qualifications, I want you to read that whole page to yourself. So turn off the video if you have to. But understand the differences in type 1 and type 2 medical examinations. Because at the end, you have to provide that certificate to the Department of Motor Vehicles, or your employer will do that depending on who you work for and what the procedures are for that. But read through that page and make sure you understand the differences between both of them. As far as your driving record goes, you have to provide your employer with a 3-year driving history. Now, sometimes your employer sends for that. They may give you the form to send for that yourself, but you have to supply them with a 3-year driving record. Some employers will ask you to do that every 3 years. Some may not. Be sure to check with your employer to see what it is that they want. Now, under drug and alcohol testing requirements, Federal Department of Transportation requires that anyone holding a CDL and a type 1 operator's license is subject to pre-employment drug and alcohol testing. Now, the circumstances surrounding when you can be tested for drugs or alcohol, one is before employment, pre-employment. You have to have a drug test. The other one is just random drug and alcohol tests by your employer. The third one would be a post-crash drug and alcohol test. And the fourth one is anytime an employer has any suspicion that you're under drug or alcohol, they can request a test. Now remember, marijuana is a controlled substance. If you operate a CDL, if you have a CDL and operate a commercial vehicle of any kind, you cannot have any marijuana in your system, whether it's medical or not. Now, for the disqualification of the use of alcohol, you'll notice in that paragraph that if you end up with a 0.02 BAC, blood alcohol content, or higher, driving a school bus, your license can be suspended. And for any other commercial vehicle, it's a 0.04 or above. Now compare that to driving your passenger vehicle, your own vehicle. The state limit is 0.08. So the ramifications of consuming alcohol while driving a commercial vehicle is a lot greater, and it's a lot more stringent. Now under training, one of the requirements is that you have to complete a school bus clinic. You have to do this 6 months before you obtain your school bus endorsement. And you have to do this every 4 years. In order to get your endorsement every 4 years, you have to attend a school bus clinic put on by a certified instructor. Now read that training section for yourself. There's more information there on what's going to be taught in those clinics and how to find out where and who is providing them. Now, under license testing, take a look at those two charts for Type 1 and Type 2. It will tell you what you will need to obtain those licenses or endorsements. But also make note that if you want an air brake endorsement, you will have to take a special written test for air brakes and a driving test for air brakes. But your instructor should put you through all of that. Let's continue by taking a look at scheduling and taking your driver's test. Now, again, you should be following along with me in this book, the Vermont School Bus Manual. Take a look at it under scheduling, and let's just see what you can expect. You can call down to the motor vehicle department or get on their website and schedule your written test anytime after your instructor has given you the class, because you're kind of on your own for that. But for the road test, your instructor has to go with you, so you need to coordinate with him when to set that test up. And it has to be 14 days, at least 14 days, after you have taken your written test. So be sure to coordinate with him on when to do that. Now, under the section Vision and Knowledge Tests, your vision test should already have been taken when you got your medical certificate. But if not, the Department of Motor Vehicles has the ability to test your eyes right there. And also, if you're taking a test for Type 2 school bus, you only need to study that Vermont School Bus Manual. You don't need to study the large CDL manual. Now, for your Type 1 school bus, you're going to be required to take 4 written tests. One is the CDL General Knowledge. One is from the Commercial Driver's Manual. The other one is for your passenger endorsement, which is in your Vermont CDL manual. And the other one is for your school bus endorsement, which is this manual. You will also may want your air brake endorsement, which would be a separate test. Be sure to coordinate with your instructor whether or not you want to do that before going and taking those written tests. Also, be sure you know which tests you're taking when you get there. They may not know that you're only doing school bus, so be sure to tell them. They may not know that you don't want the hazardous or hazmat test or the trailer test, so be sure to tell them. Make sure you're taking the right ones. And check the list in this page to see what items you need to bring for the test. And also check that note below. Remember, if you're taking your test in a multifunction school bus, you're going to be restricted to using only that bus. Now, under the section Taking Your Road Test, you'll see that they're going to have you do 3 separate things. One is you're going to have to do a pre-trip inspection of your bus, and you'll have to do that thoroughly. Your instructor will show you how to do that. You will have to maneuver your way around a obstacle course with cones, including an alley dock test that you back into. And then you'll be able to drive out on the road with your examiner, and he's going to have you do a railroad crossing, and he'll have you do a student stop, a hill stop, and he may even have you turn around. He'll do a number of other things, or have you do a number of other things like reading signs or being sure to stop at stop signs, not hitting curbs. Just pay attention to your instructor, do it the right way, and you won't have any problem at all. Be sure to check the list below to see what items you need to bring for that test as well. Now check under non-resident. You'll see that out-of-state drivers holding a CDL school bus has to maintain your school bus endorsement in that state. If you're coming to Vermont to drive a Type 2 bus, you have to go through the written test for the school bus endorsement and a driving test. Also, under renewal endorsement, you'll see that your school bus endorsement is only good for 4 years. So every 4 years, you have to call the motor vehicle department, make an appointment for that written test, and redo it. And you also have to have a school bus clinic within 6 months of taking that test. Also remember that you pay for these tests, your licensing. You are often paid for training to get your CDL, but you pay for your licensing. Most companies won't reimburse you for that because that license is yours and it belongs to you. And under Section 2, it talks about the licensing authority for your medical exam and the certificate that you have to provide to the motor vehicle department. Read through that paragraph because it also has some interesting laws about being diabetic and how to get certified if you are. Now let's take a look at Vermont law. In that book on the next page, you'll see where it's actually written out for you. It's Title 23, Section 1282, and it under A1 it shows you the licensing authority for Type 1 and Type 2 school bus. And Section 3, 4, and 5 talk about training and licensing and what to provide for your employer. All of these we've already talked about, but they go into much more detail the way it's written in law. Now pay attention to Section B, which is an important one. It's when your school bus should be inspected and how. And it has to be inspected 3 times a year, once during January, February, or March, or April, and once during May, June, July, or August, and once during September, October, November, or December. 3 times a year. The owners of the school buses are responsible for that, but you need to know it, and you need to know where that certificate is in your school bus. Now, Section D1 is also talking about stuff we've already gone over, but it's a little more explicit about your medical certificate and when to supply that, what that should look like. So read through those. There's a little more detail in there that may interest you. Section C is also an important one because it tells you basically how many students you can put in a seat, and that they can't be standing up, and you can't add seats to a school bus. So read that closely and check it out. Section 3 here is also important. It requires that your medical exam be done every 2 years as described under the section that you're looking at. Now take a look at Section F for a minute. This is where the state gets the authority to make sure you don't idle your school bus for longer than you're supposed to. In Vermont, that's 5 minutes. In other parts of the country, it's different. There are different time limits. I won't tell you what they are. I don't want to confuse you. If you're going for your Vermont license, just remember 5 minutes. Now, it does allow in this section provisions for defrosting or cooling or heating, different types of conditions where you can idle longer or idle the bus while you're boarding or discharging students. For one thing, you can't turn the bus off when you're boarding or discharging students in a modern school bus because it will set off the pre-trip alarm, and you don't want that to happen. So pay attention to this section, read through it, and the idling time for Vermont is 5 minutes. Now, Section B describes what is not a commercial vehicle, even though you might think it is. One of them are emergency vehicles. Another one is motorhomes or personal vehicles, and also vehicles owned or operated by the government, and also any farm machinery. Now, this next section is also important under definitions. What is a commercial vehicle? And you'll see that it says a commercial vehicle is a vehicle that with a gross weight of more than 26,001 pounds and or carries more than 15 passengers, 15 people, including the operator, or carries hazardous waste material. Those are all considered commercial vehicles. Now, under Title 23, Section 4107, is giving the authority of licensing that you can't drive a vehicle without a proper CDL license, basically. And you can't drive a commercial vehicle if you're under suspension. But it also gives the exception that unless it's farm equipment or farm-related services, then you can drive it.